Hello, I'm OOOOO and I'm going to talk about the demo of Citadelum. Recently I've been trying to treat myself to not playing early access games. I've been ranting recently about playing unfinished games ruining my life and why can't I have nice things. And I thought, you know what, why don't I actually just play some finished games for once and go on a new arc where I play games that were once in early access and are now finished. So that's why it's special that I'm here, because I was so ready not to play the demo of some random game, and I actually don't understand how I came to be playing this game. I think I got this with spam emails. If you don't know, if you have a YouTube channel that talks about games, or if somebody decides you have one, you will get added to 1,000 spam email lists that will basically send you games for free. Well, that sounds good, doesn't it? Well, until you see what games are really like you out there in the public, there are all kinds of algorithms and curators and trends that keep you from seeing the true horror of what games are actually being released constantly every day. How many is it? I don't know. It's hundreds a day. I probably get sent 10 a day in terms of games, and this is without exaggeration. There's an endless supply of games I could play for free. It's just that they're all well, I would never even look at them, basically. I would never read the email. I've got my filter set up so that virtually all such emails are filtered out. However, now and again, a game gets through the filters. Citadelum did this, and it gets into my inbox, and I actually look at it, and I was like, wait a second, this game? It's just Caesar 3, the greatest game of all time. Somebody is making some kind of spiritual successor to Caesar 3. Red alert, right? Throw all principles out the window. I have to make a video saying that this is good, no matter whether it's good, just because in principle this is a really good idea. I'm glad somebody is doing this, because Caesar 3 is my bae. So why don't we look at what's happening on the screen? If you've seen my extremely high quality / the same as this rant about Caesar 3 on this channel, maybe you'll recognize that this game is doing Caesar 3 stuff. We've got a fire station and an engineer post next to a whole bunch of houses, with a market building and a big circular reservoir with an aqueduct. It's extremely Caesar 3, so even though the game doesn't explicitly copy Caesar 3, it is different. It has so many niche choices that are from Caesar 3, but you probably wouldn't do if you were making a game from scratch, that it is clearly supposed to be a successor to Caesar 3. Let's call it Caesar 3 2, because I think there actually is a Caesar 4 that isn't a worthy successor to Caesar 3, or something. Here we're doing the thing where you put farms down and make a granary to get food into them, like in Caesar 3. The farms aren't very large, it's just like a building and a tiny field, and they produce absolutely tons of resources for how much space they take up. It's just kind of like in Caesar 3. You might be wondering well, why is it like that? And the game developer's response might be, because they got away with it in Caesar 3, something like that. There's no in-game reason why you produce so much food off tiny backyard lots. But check this out. This menu shows you all kinds of numbers, and this is part of the real reason why I think this game is promising. Not only is it just appealing to my nostalgia, it actually appears to be a pretty decent city builder that's tackling a lot of the issues where I would play a city builder and I would whine and moan, being I've made my 3 wheat farms, but I don't know how much wheat they collectively produce, I don't know how much wheat we need, I can't make it completely perfect so that I have exactly the amount of production that we need, that sort of thing, by looking at stats and graphs and other tycoonish kind of things. Well, in this game, it straight up tells you all of your consumption numbers for everything, which is at least almost the correct thing to do. It's time for Sneaky Devin to sneak in and reverse my compliment just there, because I had something similar with a game called Dyson Sphere Program, where it has this comprehensive stats system to help you manage your economy, but it tells you not necessarily what you need to do, but what is happening. And that's not quite the information that you want to plan your expansions, because, well, say for example, if our town doesn't have enough storage to store all of the wheat it makes, then the wheat production stats will say 0. It will say you're not producing any wheat, and that's not what I really need to know. While it's helpful to know that separately, what I want is a thing that says, here is how much wheat your town can produce, here is how much wheat your town would need if using it at its maximum rate, with no logistical obstructions. And from that you know what you're supposed to build. This is the thing that Caesar 3.2 doesn't quite achieve. In practice, the number it gives you and the number I want will very often be the same. So like a lot of the time this complaint doesn't matter, but I'm still going to make it because that's what I'm here for, I guess. But yes, that you could also offer stats on the potential production of your town and its potential consumption of everything, because that is meaningful, separate to just what it consumed in the last day or something like that. Yes, even when I pretty much get what I want, I'm still ungrateful and I still complain, but again, that's just what I'm here for. So this is overall actually a really good step, a step in the right direction to have all of this stuff. You can also mass manage employment, a bit like in Caesar 3. In Caesar 3 you could manage like the priorities of employment, and people had a bit more free choice about where they actually worked, but you had a priority list for like, please do all of these jobs first. Here you can just directly assign people to do jobs, so it's more micro-y. And also, when you assign people to do a job, they start doing it instantaneously. So there's no system where they have to go there or it's only going to take effect the next day. Your production will just instantly change based on whatever the employment layout is. So that's a very micro-heavy system, or at least it's a micro-friendly system. Like, you don't have to micro that, but you can imagine situations where you want to bounce people around between buildings to like slightly overproduce something in one moment and then underproduce it another moment to free up labor to do something else in a specific moment. You could do some real, what I call Frostpunk style micro, because that's the game I remember doing it in the most, where like if you play Frostpunk on the extreme difficulty, you have to constantly change who is working where. You could do something like that. So I appreciated that. It doesn't necessarily make sense, but, well, this isn't a very make-sense-y sort of game, really. Caesar 3 isn't a make-sense universe. It's a city builder with just its own rules. It could almost be described as a puzzle city builder. And it's a similar thing here, for a slightly different reason. And I'm using this as a very vague segue into a topic I wanted to talk about, which is, well, you might have noticed when I select certain things, a big square appears around them. And this square is the range of buildings. So this is the huge difference that differentiates this game the most from Caesar 3. In Caesar 3, the logistics, the economy was handled via the so-called walker system, where each building would generate people to represent it, and they would walk around, and any houses they walked past would be considered to be serviced by the building that sent out the walker. So basically everything was home delivery, home service, and somebody had to come to your house to do the thing. If you wanted to go to the bath, nope, the bath has to come to you. However, because the service person, the walker, had random tendencies, they could walk wherever they wanted, and every time they went to a corner there'd be a certain chance they would go in a certain direction, and those chances would change based on like what directions people had gone recently and things. You essentially would get situations where people living right next to the bathhouse couldn't go there or wouldn't be considered to be serviced by the bathhouse because the person randomly walked off somewhere else for too long, and then your houses devolve and it causes economic chaos. There were all sorts of weird things that would arise from this slightly unusual system. So this game goes a completely different direction. It goes in the kind of normal direction that I didn't want to see, which is having buildings just have a range. So you build things in range of a building is considered to be serviced by it. And this actually doesn't work with the town layout I'm going for here. I'm making a really Caesar 3 friendly town layout, or at least at first I was, by just instinctually trying to avoid walker jank by having there be like one circular road with all of the houses on the inside of it, and then you'd have all of the service workers walking around the outside and not give them other places they could go to avoid unwanted effects. But yes, gradually you can see we're going to move away from that and just have a more normal looking road layout. And that is the big downside, of course, of having the weird walker jank. You can't have normal road layouts. You can't have anything that looks naturalistic, because you have to really minimize how many road junctions there are. And your towns end up being these weird exploity like bubbles on chains going across the map. Doesn't matter. Here we have the area of effect system, but this also comes with its own selection of problems, and indeed it's also not naturalistic, because in order to have the area of effect cover the maximum number of buildings, and because the area of effects are square, you basically want to make all of your houses in a big square around the buildings that service them. so you're also kind of limited in what you can do with that. We'll talk about my potential solution to that in a second. First, this has happened in the footage, so I better talk about this. You can also send a guy out to walk around the world. Like in Caesar 3, there is a world around your town. In Caesar 3, all you would do is just trade with the other towns near you. That was the purpose of the world. And I think that might also be the purpose of the world here in this game. It is only that in order to trade with a town, you have to send an explorer to find the town. This doesn't necessarily make sense. This is supposed to be taking place in Italy in the time of Octavian, like you're rebuilding things after the Civil War or something like that. So I don't know why we don't know what the other Roman cities are, so we have to go and like discover them in the fog of war. It might be better, you could do like the exact same mechanic if you could see the map, but you had to send an envoy somewhere to be allowed to trade with them or something. It would be the same mechanical thing, but maybe, I don't know, make more sense. And you could save the explorer system for cases where you're building on the border with the unknown world or something like that. Well, it doesn't matter too much. There's some system you can use to get trade deals with cities. Your town will probably be producing something, you'll sell it to them, you'll get cash, and there are more economic concerns in this game versus Caesar 3. You can see towards the top of the screen you need to gather wood and make it into planks, and gather stone and make it into like stone slabs or something like that. So there's a more involved basic economy for building things. It's not all just money, which is how it used to be, although money is involved in everything as well. So I was going to say, what do I think would be the way to do this area of effect building service radius thing a little bit better? And the answer is to ape a different game, this time Anno 1800. I think Anno 1800 strikes the correct balance between buildings having an area of effect and the Caesar 3 style buildings like being projected down roads, where in Anno 1800 it would measure the distance on the road between a house and a thing the house might want to use, and if it just wasn't that far away by road distance, it would be considered in range. So right here, for example, I've got a market building that is surrounded by houses, and it has to be like this because the market has a set range. The market peddlers can't go far away from this central point, so I have to build around it. But in principle, if I built just a big long road with the market in the middle, we could still get a system where the houses were equally distant from the market on a single straight road as they are here on a square road that's spiraling around. But that wouldn't work with area of effect mechanics, because it wouldn't be in the area of effect. Well, there you go, that makes sense, doesn't it? But that's not how stuff works. That's like my big criticism of this, aside from it sort of forcing you to build in squares to bend around the area of effect. In real life, it probably is the road distance that actually affects like how far they're going to take things. So just letting it be how long does it take to go from the market to a house, like let that determine whether the market serves the house, rather than, well, is it technically near it in some way? That would probably be better. Now, it's not necessarily a bad idea to do this in a game, it's just my preference really, because this is the puzzle aspect. Like you give all the different buildings different areas of effect, and you're essentially tasking the player to come up with an efficient layout given these areas of effect. So they don't really have to make sense or be like an immersion factor, it's just a challenge for the puzzle. It's like, well, the market only covers this much space, so you'll have to plan out how you're going to make, say, 5 markets to cover the extent of a housing district, and where are you going to put them to have them use their area of effect most efficiently, that is, to have their area of effect most filled with the things that use their service. And the more services you want houses to have, and the more different buildings with different areas of effect you have to cram into this housing layout, well, you can imagine you get some sort of system where it's probably going to be like things with a big area of effect in the middle, then like a layer of housing, then things with a smaller area of effect, and then another layer of housing, something like that. So you'd come up with some sort of system, and that would be what you do. And that's a very Caesar 3-like thing to do, where you're essentially using the mechanics that don't necessarily make sense to just come up with a design that works for you, that works around the mechanics. And it's more about just working out how to do it because the game is just seeing if you can work out how to do it, than it being any sort of realistic city builder consideration. And, well, different people will have different opinions on that. I both like and dislike it at the same time. I think I would prefer a more normal kind of system and less puzzly system, personally. But it's still okay, I suppose. It gets the job done, and it's probably easy to program and stuff, which is nice. But I don't know. There was also one other factor to the walker system that I do like, that perhaps isn't quite so replicated here. which is that when you had all these service buildings sending people out to spread the service, they would be dressed to represent like their class or their role in society. So once you had loads of buildings together, you'd see crowds of all different kinds of people walking about your town, and it gave you this sense that there are lots of different kinds of people in your town. Here we have a more authentic take, where I think just having population makes people walk around the streets. They're not necessarily doing anything, they're supposed to be at their job and they are considered to be working, but people just wander around. And this gives you probably a more realistic look at what a Roman street would be like. Everyone's just wearing linen and they're kind of normal people just doing stuff. They're not in sort of cartoonish outfits as they sort of were in Caesar 3. But I missed it to some extent. It's less charming, I guess, that's the way to put it. Although you might have seen, you can look inside buildings in this game, which is a more charming thing, and also helps with the authenticity as well. Like, you've probably noticed, if you zoom into buildings now and again, you can look inside and see how they change as they upgrade as well, and see people doing stuff. And that's a neat little feature. Not a feature that I really use, because I'm always like in super gamer mode. I'm just up here doing the economy stuff. I would never go down to ground to see what people are actually doing unless I thought they were causing economic problems. That's the sort of tycoonish city builder player I am. But I thought it was a really cool feature. Possibly could be categorized as a thing I occasionally mention on this channel of the thing that's cool but you shouldn't look at it style mechanic, where like it would be cool to go and look at the inside of these buildings, but because you're quote-unquote supposed to be doing something else that's unrelated to that the entire time, there's no part of the game where you need to do it, and so there's a slight sense of wastefulness to have that system in the game because you don't need to do it. Like, the game never asks you to use it for anything. It's just there for fun, and that makes me mad because it should probably be like Chekhov's gun into the game design in some way, somewhere. But now we're really like going to the bottom of the barrel to find things to complain about at this stage. That obviously doesn't really matter in practice, and I didn't think about it at all while playing. What we're actually doing is the Caesar 3 thing, where your houses have certain requirements to level up, and you're using your town's economy to produce the things the buildings need to level up, and also adding decorations, a very Caesar 3-ish thing to be doing. Each building will only level up if the area is desirable enough, so it has to kind of look nice, basically encouraging you to make pretty looking towns. Here's something that really is Chekhov's gunned into the mechanics of the game. Like, you could imagine this being an optional system where you could decorate your town if you want. There are millions of tycoon and city builder type games that let you decorate things if you would like. Here, it's actually part of the game. Like, the game actually does want you to make a beautiful looking town, and your town works better if it's beautiful, so you should make it beautiful. Well, that's convenient, isn't it? So we're going to end up making some beautiful towns. So yes, that's why I left like a gap you can see in between all of my houses in this Caesar 3 instinct, where I'm like, I'm going to build gardens there to upgrade these houses later, but as I said, this house layout isn't actually very good with the area of effect mechanics because I wanted there to be more service buildings on the inside of the housing block. So that's probably the wrong idea, but yes, the right idea part was having space left in the housing areas, just to make parks and stuff, because you actually do need to do that. It's not just for fun. And that's pretty neato. Well, the main thing I like about it is that it's like Caesar 3. Like, if you ask me to justify having that as a game mechanic, I'd be like, well, it's like Caesar 3, therefore it's good. I don't immediately be like, oh, it's so cool that they integrated decorations into the game mechanics. That's really an afterthought. I'm just like, yes, Caesar 3, Caesar 3, that sort of thing. So yeah, that's my game design commentary. If you are a monkey that once played the 90s PC hit classic Caesar 3, Citadelum's kind of like it, and in some ways it's better. Like, the economy management is better, there's more to do, the reporting on the stats is better, as I ranted about earlier, and that makes me happy in a different kind of way. But it also doesn't quite have the same janky charm. Now, while this is a good thing, like, the thing it doesn't have from Caesar 3 is the bad part. I'm still mad because of the aforementioned monkey Caesar 3 brain. I think, anyway. So yes, maybe I think they could benefit from doing something with the roads rather than area of effect to move towards a more realistic and more customizable city layout system that would probably end up being less strict and less like it's forcing you to make things in a block. Although at the same time that would make it less of a logistics puzzle because it's less strict. So if you give the players more things they're allowed to do, then this gives them more leeway to quote-unquote do it wrong, and maybe that's not what they want players to be focusing on, because this is kind of secretly a puzzle game in the Caesar 3 vein, disguised as a city builder. Well, who knows. I'm going to come back tomorrow, and I'm going to rant about something that I think is actually bad about this game. I'm going to turn off my Caesar 3 brain and tell you something I genuinely didn't like about this demo tomorrow. Let's see what it is. And I'm back. Now, I don't know if this thing really is going to be a big problem because I only played the demo, but the issue I had was with the logistics. You can see I've got one building right now with a little cart sign over it. It's saying it doesn't have access to something or other at the market. Now, this could be because that thing doesn't exist in our economy, or it could be because of the issue I'm trying to point out here, the logistics side of things, where even if you do produce enough of something, there's a bottleneck for how much stuff can be moved around your town. And I guess I just don't know how it works. Maybe that's the issue I'm having. It's not obvious at a glance why things aren't in supply. As you can see right now, the game eventually decides that all of our houses don't have something or other. And I think it's because we don't have enough markets, maybe? Well, I don't know. There's no point on speculating on the reason. I don't know what the problem is. It feels like I've got more markets than I should have. I've got more granaries than I should have because I was trying to deal with this problem by brute force and not finding the answer. So while it's great, as I said, that we have these stats on like how much stuff is being produced, there is also another menu that's required there, which is what is your distribution capacity for stuff. Because it starts getting confusing. Adding on to the fact that right here, we have technically a negative amount of wheat production because we are using wheat to make bread, but we can't produce any more wheat because there's no storage space for it. I've got 3 granaries next to our wheat farms, and I'm feeling like maybe the granary staff are the ones who move the wheat around. Meanwhile, all the buildings nearby say they don't have enough wheat, so I just don't know what's going on. It seems there is a logistical layer to things where you need to be able to add like Teamsters or something like in Tropico. We need to be able to add more people to the distribution network to make it run faster or something, and maybe the answer there is building more granaries and markets and warehouses, which is what I was trying to do. But I didn't know how successful that was. Well, I know it's unsuccessful because it hasn't worked so far. And one negative comparison to make with Caesar 3 is that in Caesar 3, while it had a similar system of logistics and people moving things around all the time, you could see it happening, so you could see the goods moving around. Here you can also see the goods moving around in that there are small icons on top of people who are carrying things, but it's a little bit more abstract because you can't like see how much of the stuff is in each place. So like in Caesar 3, to reference Caesar 3 once again, there would be big visible piles of things in locations where it was building up, so you could kind of tell how the logistics was going. It was still bad in a similar way to what I'm saying is bad here. In that, to really make use of that mechanic, you need to have better communication, you need to know what's happening and know the rate of flow of things, so you can do some game stuff with it, so you can make a decision based on it. And as it stands, I think it's trial and error, or just pure experience, or knowing how many people need to be in a market for how many houses there are nearby, or something like that to work it out. And it wasn't working out for me right away at the very least. So yes, what I don't know is, were I to keep playing the game, would that become more obvious, like what the problem was, or is that just what the game's like? Is it going to be the case that 100 hours in you still don't really know how much logistical capacity you need to move things around, or it changes too much for gut instinct to ever really develop? I don't know. But it did worry me, it bothered me, that it felt like things were going well, but there was this aspect where it was going to stop things from going well in a way I didn't feel like was under my control, or I really had like visibility of. I didn't know what the problem was. I also didn't know how to solve what I thought the problem was. So I was just sort of stuck there, like not enjoying that part of the city building and economy management experience. So would that be a big problem in the game as a whole? We'll never know, because this was only the demo. This is a very rare first impressions video on the OOOOO channel, because normally I would only make a first impressions video if the game's first impression was negative enough that I couldn't be bothered to play the rest of it, and I just ran away, but I still wanted to use the footage to make some content. In this case, the game is actually going to make me leave because it's only the demo, so we have an ultra rare positive first impression. If this was the full game, I would have kept playing it, and you can see I've progressed into the next mission. Like in Season 3, it's a series of missions, and that's again where the puzzle aspect comes in. It gives you a map, and it's like, can you achieve this on this map? This does invoke a problem that I often bring up on this channel when talking about city builders, the problem of me not wanting to make more than one city in a city builder. So I would sort of rather have it be the second mission was take the town you made in the first mission and do something else with it. So like you're still using what you did earlier and everything's compounding and building on top of each other. That's not what it's like in Season 3, I guess, so I have to give them a pass in this game as well. That's just the way it works at this stage, it seems. The thing about the demo is, as you can see here, you can't save the game. So it might even be that this demo actually contains the full game, for all I know, you just can never save. But I decided to stop in the second mission thinking, well, I'm going to have to stop soon, aren't I, so there's no point playing anymore. And that was that. I thought this looked pretty promising. Had a few issues that I thought, oh, maybe that would become a problem, like the more and more I played it or something. And of course, some aspects of it are too good. Like, I'm like, oh, Season 3 was worse than this, therefore this game should be worse in order to be more like Season 3, which is going to be very confusing for the developers to deal with if they're looking at this feedback and being like, well, how do we deal with this reviewer's complaints? He said it was too good, and he wants it to be worse. Well, yep. Go deal with that, developers. Have fun with that. So anyway, this looks good. I'm pretty sure the game is still in development. It's not even in early access. I don't actually know the situation. I think it has like a closed beta or something going on. I don't remember how I have the demo, as I said earlier, but here I am. If at some point I end up with the full game, and since I got the demo for free, I probably will end up being given the full game for free one day, then I'll probably play it and make a better video than this on this game, because it looks like it's going to be a good time, if only because it's something like Season 3. We can cut off the analysis right there. We don't have to look at like where it sits in the city builder landscape or any of the actual mechanics. It's something like Season 3, and that's enough said. There we go. And speaking of enough said, I think I'll leave. See you next time.